Hello, I'm with Christian Daniel, who is a marine biologist. You are a young marine researcher, and I am going to be talking to Christian all about fish.
Mm-hmm.
And Christian, we have 45 minutes radio interview, but I'd like you to give me some very quick tips about how to choose the right kind of fish, which is good for health and also for the health of the environment.
Right, absolutely. And as you may know, fish is actually an important part of a healthy and balanced diet to the point where the NHS actually requires up to 3 servings per week. However, just because of the human impacts we've had on the environment over the past couple centuries, really, the meat of the fish itself in a lot of species has actually been compromised. So really the unfortunate part of it is if you're a person who's eating fish, especially if you're a woman who's intending to possibly have children one day, or especially if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, you really need to sort of think about what's the right kind of fish to eat. And right off the cuff, I'd say the healthiest, the most environmentally manageable and healthy fish that you could have include things like sardines and herring are very good to eat. Farmed tilapia is definitely one of the top 5 proteins that you can actually have in your diet. Salmon, especially wild-caught salmon, is actually very good. And light tuna, so canned, non-fatty tuna, is actually another thing that you can put into your diet and get a lot of benefits out of, as opposed to the issues. Shellfish such as oysters and mussels and scallops also have a lot of very good health benefits without too many environmental issues. But really the things to avoid are things like large tuna, swordfish, tuna steaks especially, shark especially, just about any large species are very problematic. But really the best thing you can do is educate yourself.
Yeah, so in our interview, we will be talking about not just the health benefits of fish, because most of us know it has very high omega-3 content, which is very good. And fish is a very good source of protein because it doesn't have huge amounts of fat like other animal proteins. However, in our interview, we are going to be also looking at how mercury gets into the fish. And the few tips that Christian you just gave is based on the amount of mercury that can get absorbed into this fish.
Right.
So you were explaining to me during the actual radio interview that from plankton to shark.
Right.
So can you just explain that very briefly?
Very. So there's a concept in biology that's something called bioaccumulation, and what that translates into is really all it means is the higher you are on the food chain, or the higher on the food web really that you are, the more of just about any kind of toxin that you have in your body. So for example, if you think, so there's small amounts of mercury occurring in the ocean, a lot more now because of industrial pollution and other human factors. But the way to think about where mercury comes from and how it gets into fish is to start at the bottom of the food chain. And so if you imagine, say, a piece of seaweed only absorbs 1 piece of mercury, just for the sake of this example, and you have this piece of seaweed with 1 part of mercury in it, and then you have a small fish that has to eat 10 pieces of seaweed, and so by the end of its natural lifetime, it has about 10 parts of mercury in it. And then along comes another fish that has to eat 10 small fish. And so say you have a salmon that comes along, eats 10 small fish, and now it has 100 parts of mercury in it. And then you have a larger fish that comes along and eats this salmon that has 1,000 parts of mercury in it. And then that gets eaten by a shark. You have 10 of those being eaten by a shark. And so that has 10,000 parts of mercury stored in its body. And so that's what bioaccumulation is. It's the animals accumulating these negative toxins that really just sort of stay in the meat and fats of different animals. And so that's why, for example, you get a lot more mercury from, say, a bluefin tuna, which is one of the largest predators in the ocean, one of the highest on the food chain fishes, and therefore has large amounts of mercury in it, when you compare it to, say, an anchovy, which is only eating things at the very bottom of the food chain, and therefore doesn't have as much mercury in its flesh. And so really, fish that eat seaweed and other plants are actually some of the best you can eat for that reason.
Yeah, that's why you suggest shrimps.
Well, then that's where the other issue comes in is, yes, shrimps have very little mercury, but in certain species of shrimp, the environmental impact can actually offset that, where even if the shrimp is healthy for you, it's doing so many negative things to the ocean environment that actually stops being really worthwhile and ethical to eat them when you have other options.
So as you can see, there are lots of factors to consider before you choose your seafood. In our interview, we will be talking about not just mercury, but also an important concept of microplastic, which is not actually the plastic that you can see from your naked eyes, but plastic that gets disintegrated and gets into the flesh of the fish, which you could be consuming. And we'll also be looking at how you might actually be eating a fish which is not what it says on the menu, because of how different species are actually served under the name of something which it isn't when you go to a restaurant. So it's a very interesting interview that I had the opportunity to do with Christian Daniel. And Christian, today we live in an era of apps. So is there an app that can help all of us to choose the right kind of fish?
Thank you. And like you said, there's an app for everything right now, and making environmentally conscious food decisions is one of those things that there is an app for. So if you look up Seafood Watch, it's there's a website, and there's also a free app on the iTunes Store and Google Play Store that you can download. It's very easy, doesn't take up too much space on your phone, so you can take all those selfies still. That will actually tell you where different fishes come from compared to how environmentally friendly it is, what are some of the better kinds of fish that you can eat from a ecologically ethical standpoint, and even specifically within one kind of fish, whether getting it from a farm or getting it wild or from one country or another is more sustainable. So again, it's called Seafood Watch, and it's the first thing I would recommend if you want to be a conscientious eater of fish and seafood.
That's fantastic. So to listen to this entire interview on UK Health Radio, do stay tuned to www.uyhradio.com. Unlock your health. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you. It was lovely talking.